Hi guys, welcome to Seraphim TV. Those who have been here with us feel appreciated, love. Thank you for supporting us all the time. And those who haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. Subscription is free, absolutely free. Press the red button, like this video. So today I have a very interesting and exciting topic. We'll be talking about spirituality, reality, and modern man. And we are honored to have on board a man of God and a young gentleman that will be joining us into this conversation. Hope you enjoy and learn something. Hi guys, welcome back to Seraphim TV. I'm your host Seraphim Were, and today I have a special guest, two gentlemen with me joining me on this platform. If you haven't subscribed to this channel, kindly do subscribe. Press that button right now. It's free. Subscription is absolutely free. Join us, engage us on this platform. And so today, I always tell you, I bring the best content, things that people are not comfortable talking about, and sharing the life and how we do life, lifestyle and everything. So today I thought of, being a Christian that I am, to talk about our really life, the reality of life, and a spiritual aspect, and the current society and lifestyle, how we are doing it. And on this, I'm honored. It's so a great honor that I have a man of God. Some of you know him already. I will allow him to introduce himself, and I'm also being joined by a friend of mine on this discussion, this conversation today. So yes, gentlemen, kindly introduce yourself.
How are you doing?
I'm good.
Well, I'm Chris J. Atemo. That's my name. Glad to be here today and just to engage in the talk that we will have. Right.
Well, thank you. My name is Benedict. It's my pleasure joining this conversation. Be on board today. Thank you.
I will actually, at this point, very fast allow Mr. Mr. Tebo to bring us through. We'll be talking about spirituality, reality, and modern man. And so I'll give him that chance to tell us what his perspective, what is his understanding on this, and his take on spirituality, reality, and modern man.
I don't think that there was ever supposed to be a differentiation at all, because man did not self-originate. Man was created. In Genesis 1, 26, 37, 28, man was created. Then in Genesis 2, 7 and 8, he was formed, and God breathed into man. Man became a living soul. When you look at that process in itself, it shows you that man had no life without the spirit or the breath of God, because it is only when God breathed that man became a living soul. That word soul there means appetites, but in its initial translation, it means the appetites and the desires. The use later in the Bible, which would be the Greek, would mean the mind, the emotions, the intellect, and the will, which means that the breath that came into the man gave life to the will, the intellect, the emotions, and the mind of the person. So you generally then do not separate the will, the mind, the emotions, the intellect of the person from the spirit of the person. And from the perspective of the Bible, you know, it is very clear that there's a spirit in man. Job talked about that. There's a spirit in man. Whether the man will recognize that or not, there's a spirit in each one of us. And that spirit longs for a deeper experience than what is natural. That's why we crave for, we will either go into, our spirituality will lead us into faith, or it will lead us into meditation, or it will lead us into all forms of worship. But generally, what people are trying to fill is a void of the spirit man. So you either then will fill this void with the way that God provided, which is the knowledge of Jesus Christ, or you will fill it through other things. And sometimes people keep on seeking it, not knowing that what they have is a spiritual void. Everything else then falls on the foundation of the spiritual man that was created. That even when man was given the garden to function, to rule, to dominate, to name all the animals, he was functioning from the point of a spirit person, a spirit being. That has never changed in the mind of God. That has never changed. So even when we talk about modern, we are only modern in certain things, modern in methods. But generally, we are still basically spirit. We are basically spirit. So no matter what technology we have, no matter what advancement we make, no matter how much money man makes, no matter what kind of places he will go and conquer, of course, currently there's all this obsession with the space travel. And no matter where the man goes, no matter what man sees, eventually they come back to the base of their spirit beings. So the reality of the man is basically drawn from their spirituality. That's the reality of the man will be basically drawn from their spirituality. This is the reason you'll find people with money and commit suicide. People who have done everything and they're going into depression. Because unless their spirituality is in tune, or rather they're in tune with their spirituality, and they're at a place of self-awareness and identity and a place of a relationship spiritually, no matter what else they do, their reality becomes skewed because that is their foundation. Yeah.
Wow, that's so interesting how you brought it. So in the first place, there's no difference.
There's no difference. It was never meant supposed to be different because a man is spirit, has a soul, exists in a body. The body is just a vehicle that we use. When we die, we leave this body here. We pre-existed the body, we will exist outside of the body. So this body, that's why it keeps on changing. You know, it's no matter what we do, it will grow old, it will grow tired, it will grow sick, it will change, it will have put on weight, lose weight, all the kind of things. It is a very temporary thing. It doesn't define us, but there is the you that lives inside of that body. That if that you leaves the body, you are counted to be dead. There are people who have had things, and it is medically now, accepted that there's out-of-body experience. That science agrees with that you can have an out-of-body experience. What then science will be telling you is that there is a spirit living inside the body. That's why they would say you have an out-of-body experience. Because if the body was everything that you have, then there would be no out-of-body experience at all. So it was never supposed to be different. But because of a lot of inventions, we have created these compartments on what feeds my body, what feeds my soul, and then what feeds my spirit. But all of that is supposed to be in sync so that then man finds harmony. Part of the reason we are having issues with mental wellness is the seeking for that synchronization of the spirit, the soul, and the body. And that's why somebody may seem to be doing very well, physically or materially, but then they're not okay. They're not okay because their soul is not in sync with all of that. So the place of finding peace is having the harmony between spirit, soul, and body. When there's a discord between spirit, soul, and body, then there's going to be a problem. Yeah.
Wow. So in fact, in summary, there is a way you've presented it. Then we have different, maybe understanding of when you talk of spirituality and reality. Suppose what you're saying is the same, like the three we should have like a balance.
Yes. See, when God created, He created things that did not, or rather were not visible, and caused them to become visible. So the invisible then would be the spiritual. Then the visible would be the reality.
The reality. Yeah.
But the things that are visible came from things that are not visible, which means that even that reality is a creation of the invisible. That's why even people who do not probably subscribe to the spirituality, but they believe in intellectual discourse, they will say, things like the energy that you produce in your mind becomes the energy around your life. Because they also believe that there are invisible things that create the visible things. So that's why I say that it was never meant to be different at all. But mostly we try to engage what we feel is the reality. We try to engage what is visible, what we think we can manipulate and work out. And then we forget the bedrock of all of this is the spiritual aspect. So if you do not have a proper foundation and you're not in tune as a spiritual person, all of these other things will not make sense. Right.
True. Now, listening to you, it's very interesting. You bishop, right? No, I want to tell you bishop, because we realize that most of us then, when we say spirituality, we think religious. We are so much based on our religion, and we get controlled so much with our religion when we talk of spirituality. And that's why when you talk of we don't strike a balance, or they don't work how it was intended to be in the beginning of life, we manipulate in spirituality. Those who have the mandate, or those who have the powers, not the power, is it the mandate or what? But those who are supposed to guide us, let me put it this way, our religious leaders, manipulate us, not us. Or there is a way they manipulate the scriptures or something, but again, you realize it sounds like a manipulation of we tend to lean on one side, and then we get in a state of conflict, living the reality now, or the physical, and then with the spiritual life.
I don't know whether they're manipulating. I think sometimes people are not empowered as much as they should. And so sometimes they use what they know. And it could just be like, if you look at how the older generation parents raise their children and how parents are raising their children right now, it's totally different. But what this generation calls parental abuse was all that those parents knew. They knew that if a child was wrong, you caned them. If you set food on the table, everybody had to eat. There was nothing like, I don't like vegetables or something. Everybody had to eat over there. That's what they knew. They were not trying to be mean. They parented in the way that they knew. Then the next generation got a bit more exposed to more knowledge. They know better. It would be unfair for them, having known better, to say that their parents were trying to be mean. They did what they knew. And there are certain positives as well from that. Generally, most of the people who have led in the spheres of faith have only used what they knew. They have not had as much exposure and knowledge. Most of them just knew go and pray and then study the word and come back, and that's what they preached. They preached, service to God, live a holy life, just wait on God, and one day God will bless you, and do that. That's all they knew. And probably it was how it was also passed on to them. We also have to recognize that what we know now as truth was not accepted as truth before. There are a lot of things that were initially resisted because of either how they were misrepresented or because of the element of the lack of knowledge. So we have to still get to the place where we strike a balance, because again, today people are very permissive with everything that they want to do in the name of, having gotten better knowledge. So I think there are things that were not taught because the people could not teach them. They did not know them. And somebody can only teach what they know. Yeah.
Benedict, you still agree with what the bishop is saying?
Well, I still agree, but in some way, I can say, sometimes, in as much as we believe that those things are related in that manner, the perception sometimes tend to differ. For example, if you refer to David Hawkins, in some there is a book actually he's done about reality, spirituality, and the modern man. This person says, or he argues that sometimes the issues that come by in the course of a human life sometimes tend to have problems depending on how people perceive things. For instance, this person said that the inability to differentiate truth from falsehood, opinion from the verifiable reality, and you talk about the essence from perception, sometimes tends to contradict these two, that is, especially the spirituality and the reality. So I don't know what your take is about that, Bishop.
Well, you see, because of different exposures and different patterns of thought, see, even with science, even with psychology, even with philosophy, there will always be different shades of thought, and that is where then I always love to go back into the origin of all thought. All knowledge leads you to one source, eventually. No matter how we study it, all knowledge leads you to one thought, eventually. And we cannot dispute the fact that when people have a sense of spiritual balance, their lives will do better, even in their reality. And maybe then we should have started by defining what reality in this case would be. See, when man was created, and I'll still get back into that thought. For the record, I am first of all trained as a scientist, not a theologian. But for the record, I will bring that so that nobody has any doubt as to that. But for the record, see, I believe in the creation, and because then it makes more sense than every other thing that we would talk about, including the Charles Darwin theory. I believe in creation. It would make more sense. And if you begin to look at the behavior of man from creation, then you would understand even the modern man currently. One, the creation story will tell you that when man was created in the image and the likeness of God, then he was breathed into and he became a living soul. Then he was put into a garden where he needed to rule and have dominion. The first man, first of all, did not have somebody for a while to converse with. So you look at the modern man, we now talk about things like the man cave. What is the man cave? From the very beginning, Adam was a very mental person, non-verbal. His communication probably with God in the garden was what then somebody would today call metaphysical, because God was not coming in a bodily form. So up until today, and if I were to ask, if you brought the ladies on this set, they will tell you, we always want to get to know, what is this thing about a man going quiet? But that is the origin. The origin of man was non-verbal. The origin of the woman, when she came in, she had the voice of a man who said to her, this is bone of my bones, flesh of my flesh. And until today, a woman generally cannot stay non-conversational, because this is the origin. Every time you want to understand the patterns of things, you go back into origin and you will see it will make more sense to you from that particular perspective. The first thing man was given was work. The first thing a woman came into was a relationship. I'll tell you the truth, Seraphine, you can leave work to save a relationship. A man will break a relationship to function in his work. We still go back into the place of the beginnings. A man can mess up his marriage, his relationships, just to get a deal. It is the truth. But then for a woman, she can quit a job and go back home to save her relationship. If her marriage is not working, she will not function. So all of these things, when you get back into the place of, now, how did we begin from the beginning? You will see that these patterns are still the conversations we have even now. Yeah.
So when I'm talking, please, people should let me be. I'm a woman.
But then, maybe on that point of the behavior of these two gender, that is man and the man and woman. If you, for example, if you try looking at around in the current community, the current society that we are in, you will find that a lot of things have changed. That is as per my perception. Because when you say that a woman will even leave her job and go save a relationship, I think it is almost turning the other way around. Because currently, especially in the generation that we are in, you find that this relationship issue, especially to women, is I don't want to use this term scam because it's quite harsh, but the manner in which women currently perceive relationships, if you may agree with me, is totally different from for example, our parents did.
Well, you see, you've got to understand that there's what is presented on social media, and there is what is the reality.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Up until today, every woman still values elements of relationship, no matter how well they're doing. They can say anything that they want to say. There's something, sometimes those are just defense mechanisms. And so let me look like I don't value this thing because I'm not sure I will get what I want. But sit with them in person. In fact, why is that discussion always coming up if it did not matter? Why is that discussion always coming up? Why are we having issues with a woman who will have brought up the issue of I had a child with this man and he's leaving me? Why do we keep on having those things? Because deep inside it matters. The only thing is that they are more armed than their mothers were because they're protecting themselves from pain. And they do not know how to run away from it because they wish they would run away from it, but they cannot run away from it. So they've got this militancy that is supposed to protect them from whatever pain it is, but they still desire it. So there's the perception that people will create on social media. It's not the reality still. It's not the reality.
Can I say as a woman? Should I answer that?
Please
Because I'm here as a woman. That is the truth. We women, yeah, we value, and actually, is it? It's in the Bible. I don't remember exactly which, where it's a woman, a wise woman builds her
Yes,
house
yeah.
By their own hands.
by their own hands, or they break. Many relationships, I will agree with Mr. Atemo that many relationships that are thriving, women are behind them. Actually, behind a successful man. Anyhow, so when we talk of, I'll still go back, Mr. Temo, that spirituality, when we are talking of balancing, striking a balance, and we get so much, it's good you've captured that it's a point of what we know and maybe exposure and the knowledge that we have. But we realize we get so much like we are brainwashed. We run so much, the face, thank God you mentioned social media, that the face we show us who are saved or those who are believers, we show another face different from the life we live. And many of us are on conflict. We have conflict in our lives, in our daily lives, of what we believe, what we show, and what we live. I don't know how to approach that, how to help someone to get to a point of balancing all this and realizing that it's supposed to make a whole person, that a whole being should have a balance.
So it comes back to being at peace with yourself because all these pressures are not new. Every generation has had its own pressure, including the generation of the parents and the grandparents. They've had their own pressures on their culture when they would begin to interact with people who had different cultures. The pressures of urbanization and education and even just the pressures of other religions coming into their spaces and how do they adapt and seeing people begin to discard certain beliefs that they have. All of those were modern day pressures to them. Then getting into the spaces where you no longer have things like land, ancestral land, and people are fighting for the little resources that they had. And so people begin then to move from their rural areas to go and look for work because it seems like the only way to make a living, or rather the only way to live, is to have currency, having shifted from things like barter trade into something. All these generations have their sense of pressure. We have the pressure of technology that has come in and is putting pressure on certain things that we believed, certain things that we knew, and how we behaved. The difference is technology has offered a platform. It is not even the one shaping our behavior. It has offered a platform, and people are bringing out that behavior. Now, even in the past, if somebody was, for example, going to university, a whole community would celebrate the fact that somebody from their village has gone to the university. If they were traveling abroad, you'd have a whole bus going to JKIA to see off this person. And when they came back, it would be a celebration. There was always this thing about, celebrating wins and wanting to show that we were doing well, because we are not generally socialized to show weakness. And especially as Africans, that's why we struggle even with now the emotional wellness, especially for men, because they do not know how to show any other emotion apart from the emotions of strength, which is like anger, perceived to be of strength, which is like anger. So because we are not socialized to show weakness, we will continually want to display the place of strength. Sorry. We continually want to display the place of strength. So when people come into spaces like social media, whether they are believers or not, they want to show that they're doing well. They want to prove that they're doing well. Nobody wants to show their bad side at all. And so the conflict comes in the place of who am I versus who do people think that I am. That conflict, I come back to my beginning, is solved in the place of you making peace with who you are, your spirituality. It is your spirituality. Otherwise, everything else that we try to put up there to define ourselves and to project, eventually we go back in the evening. We look at the mirror and we know that's not us. We know that I can't afford that lifestyle. We know that I don't have the money for that. We know that I cannot fit into the clique of my friends because they're probably at a higher social class or economic class at that particular point. We know all of that reality when we go back. And that is what begins to eat people up. That's what will make somebody want to portray themselves in a way that they also know they are not, because they're not at peace with themselves. If they were at peace with themselves, they would be very okay to be in a place where everybody seems to be doing very well, and they appreciate that, but they also acknowledge that they have a different path in life, and probably not everybody was meant to be rich. I'm not an advocate for poverty either, but maybe not everybody was meant to be rich. Not everybody is supposed to live a certain kind of a life. Different people have got different functions and assignments in life. Some of the greatest people that we talk about in life, we don't hear how much they were worth, but we know how much work they did. Yeah.
Wow. So in fact, what you've just presented is answering so many questions. Just at the beginning when you said we have some people who look doing so well, yet they have even suicidal thoughts and they're actually committing suicide, and we think they are well from what they present. And that again, you also mentioned that when you are spiritually well, even your physical life is well. Does that answer why people run to church? Everyone wants to behave saved. And there's so many churches sprouting up, like there's so many churches everywhere. Doesn't know there is need. Are they addressing the need that everyone wants to seek? Is it solace or consolation from the church?
Well, I'll start with, I'm not very sure that we even have enough churches. If you do statistics, it's true.
You think they're even less?
They're less if you compare with the population. We are still a very undercharged population.
That's a new one.
When people talk about, for example, Kenya being an 80% Christian nation, they're using, you see, if you do the census now and you ask somebody what religion are you, and then you give them the options and you say Christian, Muslim or something, they'll definitely tell you Christian. But whether they are actually believers and practitioners of Christianity is another thing altogether. That's a whole different thing together. And nobody talks about the number of clubs that are showing up everywhere. I mean, today, if you go into towns like Itengela, if you move along Langata Road, if you go into areas like Kilimani, Hurlingham, which used to be a bit quiet before COVID, if you moved then you would see the number of clubs and whatever they call lounges that keep coming back to back with young people coming in there. Nobody talks about that at all. But if you see a church here and a church there, then they look too many.
It's a big deal.
Yeah, and nobody will talk about the noise that will come from those clubs. But if you go into the same building and put up a church in that building, you will hear them say, you're making noise because you people are singing. Yet you look at the kind of investment of sound that a club will put in that place. And of course, there's no club that is quiet, because then people begin to get drunk and they're all rowdy and something. Churches are a bit more organized, but people don't talk about that. The other thing that people don't really look at is, apart from the solace factor, Seraphim, the soft skills that are built in people in church through volunteering, networking, the community, the sense of community. There's so much that is built in there. Today, if you look at a lot of people who are doing quite some work, even in the marketplace, you will find a church background. There are certain things that they learned, certain things that they were taught. Across the globe, you'd hear that as well, that at least for a while, you'd hear nearly every musician who ever broke through in the secular had a church background. You know, they were trained over there. So sometimes we don't also look at the impact of this place in the lives of the community, the sense that there's a place of accountability. Even just that fact that you have somebody going into a church and you feel that they're pretending to be saved is a sense of accountability. If they were not going to that church, you would not even put that sense on them, because you just leave them to themselves. But the fact that you know this person goes to that church over there, how can you behave like this? So it already puts a certain sense of accountability to them. And I think that we have to begin learning how to draw the positives out of these things. Truth is that even in the Bible days, they said there are those who will preach for their own personal gain. There are others who will preach. And that didn't stop them. That didn't stop them. Paul said, look, whichever way, as long as the gospel is preached. So we will never really fix that completely. We can't clean it up. But we also need to then look at what are the positives, because we've got schools and we've never shut down the education system, and we have a lot of atrocities happening in schools. We've got people walking into hospital well, and suddenly they die. Their families do not know. How did that happen? What were the complications? Medical negligence. Nobody has ever said shut down the hospitals. We've got people walking into factories. We've got accidents in factories. Nobody says shut down industrialization. We have accidents on the road, and nobody says let's set aside the cars so that we don't drive. We've got plane crashes happening, and nobody will ever say let's not fly again. But when one thing happens in the church, so everybody's up in arms and they're like, shut down these churches or something. It's a whole spiritual thing as well, that one. It's a whole spiritual thing. People will say, churches do not contribute taxes. It's a lie. It's a lie. It's a lie because you'll hear of people who came from the streets, broken families, people who were drunkards and were not responsible at all, people who were in all forms of addiction, and they had behavioral change, then they become entrepreneurs. What level of contribution is that to the economy? That you turn this person who was on the streets, who was begging, who was a mugger, who was a murderer, and you now met this person become an entrepreneur and he's got his 5 to 6 employees. What level of impact is that on the economy? I think sometimes, and not to hold brief for anybody, but I think sometimes people are a bit harsh with the church.
You think so?
I think so.
In fact, just on that to mention, just last week or this week, there was a scandal about a man of God I won't mention his name though. It's been so all over social media. And if you say that's judging harshly, of course, from even personally, I won't say the truth or false. And the Bible, anyway, tells us not to judge. But do you think, just on a point of accountability, if you are trusted with a flock, a whole flock, we're talking of a capacity of a bishop, that's a wide range of people looking unto you. You are a role model. And I think that will, and I'm not answering for them, but I'm just thinking from where I'm sitting, the reason why when it comes to the church, people, we become more vocal and we are so very fast to talk about and spread the gospel about the negatives on the church. Because what we expect, what you preach, we expect you to preach water and do water, not to preach water and do wine.
You know what? It's the hypocrisy that I see even with American politics, that in the US, they will use family values as one of the credentials that will make them judge who the president should be. Then they're all divorcing and remarrying the way they want. It's a hypocrisy to put a standard for people which you know yourself you cannot produce. It's hypocritical. Whenever I see the debates around presidential candidates in the US and people are talking about family values, does America itself uphold family values? No. But then they want somebody to be there. It is trying to live your life through people. But that is not a very fair place. Not to remove the responsibility from this person. But then the truth is, we cannot plant oranges and then expect something else. If we have a community, for example, we talk about things like, we talk about things like corruption, we talk about the kind of leadership that we desire in this place. We cannot expect more than what we have accepted as a societal norm. So that is the hypocrisy for me, from the level of society. That's the hypocrisy for me. Not to mean that those who are given positions should not be accountable. Yes, they should. They should be accountable. But to stand from a place and say, look, because you are over there, you should be right. I'm allowed to be wrong. We're not going to change anything like that.
Well, I may not so much judge or point what you've just said. I'm not disagreeing anyway. But you're saying if we have to define the church and what we expect from the church and the role of the church and how it's contributing to the change and character around us, then it's not us setting the bar. It is the church. You are coming to the foundations of what is guiding you.
Which is the Bible.
It is the Bible.
And then if we get back into the very basis of it, we would understand that we are saved by grace through faith, not by works, lest any man should boast. So that even the people who are leading and we wouldn't get much into the ministerial talk as well. But if you look at the scriptures throughout, you'll see that men were chosen from among men. So all of them, even in the days of the law, which was stricter, the priest still had to offer sacrifices for his own sins and then for the sins of the people. It's not that God had this special category of people who were the sinless people who were the priests. Now, the case you talked about, I'm not very sure, but I'll let people know that they will still find certain issues within church because the person still has to work their own salvation. They have to work their own salvation with fear and trembling. It is not that God took students and called them into the ministry. They are called by the grace of God. He uses men. He has this treasure in earthen vessels. Yes, then the people have to bear the sense of responsibility because of where they are at. But the thing I'm trying to say is nobody occupies that position because of their disposition. It's like saying somebody is saved because they always looked saved. No, we're all saved because of the grace of God. So even the worst, who would look like the worst sinner, can get saved. The person who looks like they have never done anything wrong in their life, they still would then get saved.
You're saved by the grace, you say.
Well, on the same, there is something you mentioned. Let me take you back a bit about we are an undercharged population. You know, okay, as per me, I think, Chris, when you mention that it's like the whole population and the Sano in the world goes to church, because I know there are people who don't even know what a church is. There are people, well, let's call them worship places, because this one also includes the Muslims and those other religions. There are people who actually never know what a church is. And if at all they know, I'm very sure there is nobody who has ever maybe gone to church and missed a place to worship.
I don't understand what you're saying. Is it a question? Is it
No, there is something you mentioned, so I only need you maybe to clarify, because as per me, I know it will only be that we are an undercharged population if everyone could be going to church, if everyone could be knowing what worshiping is. But there are a very big number of people who don't know that. Well, there is that process. The preachers, there is the clergy are in the process of converting people to God. We don't deny that. But then there is a very big number of people who do not know what even a church looks like. Well, the structure. Because we know essentially a church is yourself, your body, the kanisa. But then now the places of worship, let me call them so. How do you relate that one, mentioning that we are an undercharged population?
No, I think he mentioned that he's still struggling to balance, from what understanding, when he mentioned of, it's me who said that the churches are coming up, there are so many, and he was just trying to answer that. He's wondering if you are saying they are coming up so many, and yet he feels they are not even enough because of the population. So, yes.
And that's still what I would say. You see, for example, if you were to go into an area and then you say there are this number of children, and then you say we've got this number of schools, and somebody based on statistics then will tell you we are under-schooled. They're not talking about the fact that there are no schools. They're saying these schools are not even enough for the population that we have. Because if you say we have 5 schools in a particular community, and then you've got 10,000 children within the community, they'll put too much pressure on the infrastructure. So to accommodate these students, you'll actually need to build more schools and more classrooms. And that is what I still say, that I don't think we are overcharged. Probably it's just that we are within the various locations. Now, Seraphim, today, mosques are being built nearly on every major street. But again, nobody will talk about that.
Actually, I'm told that they measure 200 meters from each.
Yes,
yeah.
But you won't hear people talk about the mosques are coming up. What is this hatred towards the church that people have? What is that hatred? It's a whole different discussion as well.
Yes, so Bishop, you feel like there's a lot of hate towards the church on how people are behaving. Like if anything to do with the church, people raise eyebrows. When the church are being built and constructed more around us, people have issues. Well, on me, I feel like people have embraced the church. So many people are getting saved. The attitude is positive, or I look from another angle.
You just need to check the statistics and find out how many people actually attend church or belong to a church. Nairobi has currently over 4 million people. Then you should ask yourself how many of them go to church. What is the largest church auditorium in Nairobi? We don't really have anything that would seat 10,000 people at one go. If you're talking about a population of 4 million and you don't really have 10,000 auditorium, it will tell you we're not going to church. So they're not as many as people think that they are. And then we've got to still look at what I said, that what is the impact on the people that they do have. Some of the programs that are run over there are programs that people have not had before. We're talking today about, man, spirituality, modernity, and spirituality, reality, and the modern man. When you look at programs that have been built for men in this country, they're not secular. They're not secular. They have been built first from within what would be called the church space. Because, and I can say this without any fear of contradiction, because I am among those who were pioneering programs for men in this country. My friend Simon Bevy and that, among the first who were going into secular spaces to speak about the need to build up men and to grow men. We're still coming from the church with that content to heal the world that doesn't even understand and embrace why we do the things that we do. There's a lot of positive that comes from over there, that sometimes people don't look at. So all they will see probably is there was the collection of money, which if you were to go into again, it's a whole different thing. Numbers will never lie, facts will not lie, the figures won't lie. You'd get very surprised at what people make noise about. Even the people who go into those churches, they mostly do not give the money. When people talk about, they're being manipulated, you're sitting there with adults. Nobody says that when you go, nobody talks about how many billboards portray alcoholic drinks. Nobody talks about that. That at some point, the billboards for alcohol had outnumbered the billboards for telecommunication, which used to be the bigger percentage. It used to be Safaricom and Cancel or Airtel or something. Today, it is not companies, it is brands. So you are getting particular alcoholic brands on the billboards. Before it used to be, you're talking about the company that produces that. Today, it is the brands that are competing, but nobody will talk about that. Yes, nobody talks about that. Nobody talks about how much money they put out there to draw people. Nobody talks about the effect of the fact that, see, we can talk about how women are portrayed in society. Nobody talks about how these companies will continually use women to project a sexual image and then make the young girls feel that's the life that we need to live. Nobody talks about the fact that there's a lot more that is going on over there that is distorting how people view themselves. Nobody talks about how music videos have somehow sanitized and made nearly every girl think that she needs to twerk her way in life. Nobody talks about that. But they will look at all these other things, the expenditure that you have. If you put up a club in a place like this, the amount of money that comes from that place that night is really immense, which could be the budget for a particular local congregation for a whole month. But we don't want to talk about that. Why? Because when they go into the bar, they're consuming the alcohol. It benefits them. When they go into a church, they think it benefits the ministers.
Yeah.
They will buy a bottle of alcohol at 7,000, and they will be talking about 100 shilling offering that they gave in church, and they're saying these people are eating our money. They'll be talking about 300 shillings, yet they will buy one bottle at 7,000, and they will stay around the table and buy several bottles and leave 50,000 on the table, and they will never say these people are taking our money.
So reality is, this money we are shouting about, there's not even money we take.
No.
And most of these churches, the ministers are really going out of their way to
Totally.
maintain the members.
Totally.
Because people, I'm sure like now with the COVID effects, you've really got numbers to support because they seek help from the churches.
Totally. Yeah.
But again, on all this, I'm also thinking if it made sense somehow, I don't know if to agree or disagree, that someone was reasoning, most of the church ministers, they start these churches in slums. What's the essence? I don't understand. Because on very developed estates, places, it's so hard. Is it because of space of land is not there? Or the resources may not be enough to put up in those high-end places?
It's not just resources. It's also, Seraphine, when people have economic wellness, sometimes they think they do not need God. And they make it very hard.
That's so interesting.
We have done church in the high end, and I know the challenges of doing church in the high end. So the rules around those spaces are harder, for example, than for somebody who needs to walk into a place like Islam's. Though again, you have to ask yourself, there are missionaries who go to India. Why do they go there? There's a whole population of nearly 1 billion people who need to hear the gospel. Why aren't they going into China, which has again 1.4, 1.5? India has about 1.3 billion people. Why are they not going there? Because China won't really permit you to come in and preach the gospel. So sometimes it is whether those spaces will actually allow you to come in. It is easy to knock the door. In what you would call the lower income areas, it's easier to knock the door and to speak to somebody than you would in the gated communities. When I was coming here, the pin got me lost a bit, and I parked for about 2 minutes in front of a certain gate, and shortly people came out. Because the gated people also gate their minds. They are not as very open. Then the thing is, it's not about whether churches are begun in slums. It is, do they impact the people in the slums?
Places.
Because those are human beings as well. Do we have schools in slums? Should we set up hospitals in slums? Should we have water in slums? Should we provide amenities in slums? Because those are human beings. So if we don't again go into the slums, people will say, you see, they're going into the spaces where there's money. We go into the slums and they say we're going into the place where they're going to corrupt the people. It's a whole different kind of thing, you know. It's a whole...
Essentially, it's quite conflicting because there is no specific place whereby a church is set and somebody completely agrees that indeed this one has been put here with a positive intention. Something will always come up. But then, in addition to that, there are things which happen. I think they're spiritual still, but then people do not say anything about them. Talk about these cults. You pass around, for example, Kiambu Road, between the DCA and Modaiga here. There are those posts about Illuminati and whatsoever. Nobody mentions about that. But those ones are still, I think they're still spiritual. They're still in the process of recruiting people into such cults. But then, sincerely speaking, whenever a church is put up at a place, nobody says that this one is here to save people. This one is here for a good purpose. This one is here for a good cause. They will always say something against it. That one is a fact, and I really concur with the Chris.
So
100%.
you agree that there is hate towards the church?
Indeed, it is there.
But to the Christians? Because not churches, those others are also religious.
Churches, particularly churches. Because when you say Christians, the Christians who attend already established denominations, especially the churches which are coming up. That is where the problems are coming with many people.
Well, Pastor, Bishop, I can't lower you to Pastor, you already raised Bishop. I was going around doing statistics on the same, and I met 2 or 3 different people. The first one asked, he's a choir master of a Catholic church, and he was asking, he has a challenge of striking a balance between his, he has a conflict of, he sees like people who are doing secular music, because he also trains people on the piano, and so people who are doing secular music earn a lot, or it's perceived so. And him in the gospel, and because of the church, there could be no income. Being a parent that he's a father, he finds it hard, as much he wants to hang on his faith, that he wants to serve God and want to keep his lane on the gospel side. There is a challenge. You wonder how to help such people. I know he's not the only one. There are so many people out there on that kind of situation.
Well, you see, every good gift comes from God. Now, you have to find your way how to use your gift, because when you have your gift, you have your capital for life. For example, you'll find somebody who has faith, but then they're a biology teacher in a high school. When they teach biology, they've got to say that there is the Big Bang Theory and all that kind of stuff. They don't necessarily believe in it, but that's their profession. The thing is, first of all, I've got to just dismantle the myth that there's a lot more money with the secular musicians, because there are a lot of secular musicians who are struggling. Principles are the same everywhere. The ones who have made it have learned certain things. They have understood how to turn their music into money. It is not automatic
There's
that
a
when you
trick.
go out there, then he will make money, because they're not all making money. There are also some who left the secular and came into gospel. And there are quite a number who were in the secular. Globally, there is Justin Bieber, there is Kanye West, who had done, they went big in the secular, then they still were coming back into the faith. Locally, we've seen quite a number of them as well, from people like Size 8 to Lady JD to is it JB, to people like Wahoo, who were coming back on this other side, to Amani, who used to call the Amani G at some point. All of these people again moving from that side, coming this way, to people like DNG, who came back on this other side. So it is something that you can argue on either side. But the thing is, whether you're in secular or in gospel music and whatever, you have to understand, if you're doing this thing to earn a living, then you have to understand the dynamics of the business of music. If you don't get that, even if you go into the secular, you'll still
won't.
struggle. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Now again, that was just one. One also had another question. He's a pastor in some church, and on issue perspective of marriage, and how in the Bible we are told the rib, about the story of the rib, Adam and Eve, and then reality of the church with the youth. We preach to our youth so much of you ought to pray God to send you your right rib. The youth are like the vijana wanasumbuliwa. If you tell them that, the reality is, do they have to pray and wait God to send? Does God send a signal? Will they engage that the ladies or whatever targeted people? But again, they find themselves now in a crisis. They're supposed to pray for a good wife.
I believe that when you're making certain kind of decisions, I believe that prayer really helps you. If I have 3 job opportunities today and I want to pick one, I'll pray about that. I'm praying so that I have clarity about it, because I'm about to make a decision around it. If I am in a place where I'm challenged about what decision I need to make, then I think that I would want to pray about it because of the clarity. Again, you see, decisions end you up in certain destinations. So if I take the wrong turn, I will find myself in the wrong place. So I just want to know, who am I getting in with? Or is this going to work for me or something? Abraham sent his servant to get a wife for his son Isaac. And his servant, who was supposed to be a heathen, when he left, he prayed. And he said, God, make my day successful. And let the woman who will first meet me, let her be the woman that will be married to my master's son. That's just guidance, like you would be guided about everything. When it comes to marriage, Seraphim, that's a huge decision. It's a huge decision. See, if you went to a bank today and you wanted money, what will they ask you for? And it's just money. They'll want so much, and sometimes they will want collateral. If you go to an investor right now to put in their money, they want to see the bottom line. They want to know, you've been in this business, how are your books looking? What are your projections? They want to know. When you are getting married, and we've got to tell the young people the truth about this as well, when you're getting married, do you realize that you're actually giving your life to somebody, probably for life? That you are going to share space with somebody at your lowest guard, because when you get home, even if you're a CEO at work and you have all your security, when you get home, you come here, you lower your guard, you are home. If this person is a psycho, they can take you out in the night. If this person is weird, you're going to live with us. So I just feel that the weight of the decision is what would then bring up the element of
How
I
much
need
effort
clarity.
you put in?
But I am not saying that so people should stay in prayer caves and be praying that God will send somebody. I'm just saying, so you'll meet people. You're going to meet people in your interactions. You're going to meet people at your work. You're going to meet people. Nowadays they do social media. Well, but you'll meet people in different spaces. When you begin to feel that you are being drawn a certain direction and you want to make certain decisions, I think it is important for somebody to pray about it. Yeah.
Wow. On the same, some youth was asking, he already, in the process of meeting, engaging, and socializing, it happens they get some girl expectant. And depending on the family, on how it will be dealt with, you are forced to keep that woman to be your wife. Or the lady, you're forced to keep that boy to be your husband. This person is still wants to keep their values, like they have always been saved and they're feeling guilty or something. Is there still hope that all is not lost? What would you tell such a youth?
Well, they just need to go through a process of restoration, not just the community, but themselves as well. When mistakes are made, when people fall into sin, it is not the end. It is not the end. The scripture is clear with that. It says, John talked about it. He said, I write to you so that you don't sin. But if you sin, you have an advocate with the Father, the man Jesus Christ. It's 1 John chapter 2 and verse 1. So he says that it's not that you're supposed to sin, but in case you find yourself there, it's more like insurance on the road. You're not supposed to have an accident, even though you pay your premium. But in case you have an accident, then you call your insurance company. So that is the whole thing, that because of what Christ did on the cross, then you don't carry the condemnation. But the same 1 John will tell you in verse 9, if we confess our sins and turn away from them, he is faithful to forgive. So there's also the responsibility of turning away from it. So it's not just that I am not under any condemnation, but then I continue with it. It is, I am not under condemnation, but then I go and make it right with God, and then begin to pick up and ask myself, in the case where a girl is pregnant, you want to ask yourself, so what are you supposed to do? Because there's a responsibility that is coming, the child. So we leave alone the thing that even brought the child, because you can repent about that one. But now the responsibility of raising the child, you cannot turn away from that. Yeah.
Wow. So I think when we talk of when your spiritual life is fine, then you ought to be at peace with yourself. When you are seeking peace with yourself, we realize that family is key. And that's why we have so many questions on marriages and family and children. So maybe just a last one on the same on marriage. Someone was also saying, actually he was not saying, he asked, that in the Bible, the Bible doesn't approve divorce. In that he says, if you divorce, you're supposed to stay alone forever. You're not supposed to remarry. He actually even quoted, I can't remember where.
Yes, because when they brought up the issue, they asked Jesus whether it was lawful for a man to divorce. And then he asked them, what did the law tell you? And they said, Moses in the law permitted divorce. And Jesus said, well, because of the hardness of your hearts, Moses permitted it. In the beginning, it was not so. It was not supposed to be so. But because of the hardness of the hearts of the people, so Moses allowed it. And then Jesus then went further and talked about it and said, if you will leave a woman for anything apart from sexual immorality, then you have committed adultery. So, see, the problem with trying to embrace the law, it gets very complicated. Because Jesus never talked about physical violence, but is physical violence a valid reason to leave a marriage? So should we then have somebody remain in the marriage because Jesus did not mention physical violence? Anytime we get into the law, we've got to be very ready to deal with all the aspects of the law. Probably they did not have that violence then. So it was not a reality. So he used an example of what was a reality then. Today, we've got people who are shooting each other, killing each other, people who are strangling each other. So do I then say the only reason why I can live is sexual immorality, and this person strangles you every night? Do I say that? I don't think so. I also think that God is gracious as well. So there are a lot of things that I believe would also have a contextual meaning to them. I believe so as well. My other question about then you asking about the thing of the remarriage, and my question would be to myself when I look at that and I'm thinking, so somebody is here divorced at 25, 27, 31. Then I ask myself the question, when we will say, okay, so this is what the scripture says, then this person stays publicly divorced, but then they have sexual relationships elsewhere. Are we doing justice to this person, or should we then allow them to formalize? And somebody else will argue and say, well, marriage does not take away lust. But then these are things that now we're trying to mitigate against, because you're trying to deal with whatever you're facing at that particular point, that it may not be very prudent to tell somebody who probably got into a relationship at 19 or 20, pregnant, then found themselves like they're married, and they pulled out at about 32 when they're now the woke generation, and then you tell them stay like that for the rest of the years. We're going to have a lot of sexual issues, and people aborting because they do not want to publicly be seen to be pregnant, yet everybody thinks that they're divorcees, and then you're endangering these lives. You'd be shocked at how many people now go into hospitals for things like abortion. You'd be shocked at how many people are doing that just because they've got a safe face. So I think, again, society offers us challenges. The ideal is stay married. The ideal is stay married. Work out your issues. That's the ideal.
That's the reality.
But then also, I think even the law still says, if whatever is acceptable here under the sun in the world is also acceptable in heaven. So, for example, maybe on the same point as Chris just said, if it happens that this person has to divorce with the right reason, maybe as he just mentioned, the infidelity issues and this violence thing, those are genuine reasons as to whether someone has to do it, and that one is acceptable. On the same point, like, seriously, how do you expect this person to still remain single yet still sinning? The best way it is to ensure that this person, if at all this person themselves, you know yourself, nobody can come and tell you that you're supposed to do this. If you know that at all, if you remain in this particular relationship, things are not going to be well, and you happen to divorce, then make a decision. It is you either to remarry and ensure that you settle in marriage in the right way, or you completely do away with something which will still take you back from where you came from.
Which I had.
They're hard decisions to make, actually.
Yeah, which I had. Do you be like, but I still agree then with the bishop what he just said about hypocrisy and putting out the faces. So we live a fake life. We work so much for the people.
Yeah.
For the masses, for what people have to see. And then it goes back to my topic that now you agree with me, Bishop, that from all this conversation we've had, the ideal was there should be no difference between spirituality, reality, and the man or the life they're living. But now, from what we've talked about, the truth is there is a huge difference.
And that's why I started with, it was never meant to be different.
Yeah.
All the questions you asked me have biblical answers, and of course, truth. You see, Solomon said, God made man upright. He has come with many inventions. And if you go back into how we started, I said that we have created these compartments. We have created compartments. That's why we will want to have this face here and this face here and this other face over here. It was never meant to be so. We have also adapted a lot of philosophies and ideologies depending on who is spreading them and sharing them. which also complicates certain things. But just like with the case of divorce, Jesus said in the beginning it was not supposed to be so.
Wow, so interesting. So far, guys, if you're following this conversation, I'm sure you're not the same as you started with us. We feel so much honored that you've joined us and you followed it. Let's also hear your perspective. Feel free to write to us. And if you have any question you would love to be answered, write to us. Bishop will respond to them. Not on this platform. We have not this video, but we'll have another time to answer you, to respond to your questions and your concerns. So write to us. I will share his handles. You're on Facebook?
Yes. Well, it's easy to find me on, it's CJ Atemo everywhere. CJ Atemo everywhere, yes. That's easier.
Okay. So you'll engage, but write to us through the comments. Let's hear your views and your perspective. All we've given is our perspective. We are not representing anyone. You better note that. And we thank you. We appreciate you for joining us. We'll share the handles and everyone's, my guests, below on the comments section. And until next time, we love you and thank you for joining us, supporting us, and engaging us. Bye-bye.